interview, every interview we sat down with people, we were stunned. Our jaws would have hit the ground were we not hardened reporters who are trained to keep a straight face. There were so many moments we left an interview pretty giddy that we had discovered some new fact. Now, many of the people that we spoke with, and there were more than 140 of them, many of them were front row witnesses to history, and they had been really big supporters of Donald Trump inside the White House, inside his administration, and they had been afraid to talk about him before, afraid that he might do something to them if they objected, afraid of what dangerous impulses he would get away with if they were replaced. But these people told us, for example, about the fears of a coup, that Mark Milley believed there really was something afoot and that he saw evidence of it. Second, Milley and his Joint Chiefs all began planning secretly for what they would do to try to block Donald Trump from taking some terrible action with the military to maintain his grip on power or to just create chaos. Milley was very worried, as you know, now from reading our book, that there were a lot of comparisons between the way Donald Trump was acting and Adolf Hitler had consolidated power in the 1930s by creating fear.
Phil, I know I invoked your name in terms of that question, but in the time that we have left, I want to get you on a couple of things. Michael Wolff, who has his own Trump book out called Landslide, has an op-ed piece in the New York Times, and there's one thing he puts in there that you and Carol also note in your book, and that is when you sat down with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, you did not do that in a private room or in a conference room. You did it out in public. He talked to you out in public. He did the same thing. Michael Wolff says basically he did the same thing with him. Why do you think Donald Trump wanted to do it that way? What was behind that?
Well, Jonathan, I can't speak to Michael Wolff or his reporting, but I can tell you in the case of our interview, Trump wanted to conduct the interview in the lobby at Mar-a-Lago, and he chose to do so at 5 p.m., which is just the time when dozens of his guests started showing up for the dinner hour and happy hour cocktails on the patio. And I think he wanted to be seen. I mean, I think he wanted the members of Mar-a-Lago to parade through that lobby and see him as the important king of Republican politics being interviewed by these journalists who flew in from Washington. He had us on the couch. It was all a performative act for him. And indeed, as people came in for dinner, they would come by, say hello, sometimes interrupt. Laura Ingraham, the Fox News host, was among them who showed up. And then as we were talking about these serious matters of election fraud, the Mar-a-Lago workers were setting up the dinner buffet all around us. So the raw bar guy was putting out the oysters and the shrimp over Trump's shoulder, and the Banana Foster station was getting started for dessert. It was a pretty wild scene, but, we're grateful we got to spend so much time with him and hear what he had to say.
I mean, it gives a whole new meaning to try the veal. I'm surprised he didn't say that. One more quick question. And that is this, and it's not to get you to respond to whatever Michael Wolff has written, but he does raise an interesting question. To his mind, based on his reporting, and he has written 3 books about the Trump presidency, he is convinced that Donald Trump is going to run again in 2024, and simply because he's got grievances and he wants to get back at people. After your reporting for your book, I Alone Can Fix It, and sitting with Donald Trump, hardened journalist that you are, Carol, then Phil, have you come away with the conclusion that you think Donald Trump will indeed run for president in 2024?
Jonathan, it's impossible to know, but I'll tell you, as I sat across from him on the silk brocade sofa settee and his chair, he sounded to me like a guy who wanted to run for everything. He was talking about himself in the third person, about the volume of the party that supports him. He said, look at the numbers, Republicans love Trump. He strikes me as someone who's not going to be entirely satisfied with being a kingmaker. He does view himself as the king. And as he told us, if George Washington and, Abe Lincoln were brought back from the dead, he would beat them. So he really does believe he's presidential material. He sounded like he's running.
Phil?
I agree with what Carol just said, but I would just point out that he's not going to have to actually make that decision for another year or year and a half, and that's a long time in politics. Who knows whether his company, his business will be under investigation or what would happen there. We also should keep in mind that he's 75 years old. His health is going to be a big question mark coming down the pike.
I'm sticking with my conclusion. He ain't running. Carol Leonnig, Phil Rucker, authors of I Alone Can Fix It, thank you so much for coming back to the Sunday Show.
Thanks for having us, Jonathan.
Coming up, the mounting pressure on President Biden to do something about voting rights. We'll discuss next.
Look, the American public, you can't stop them from voting. You tried last time. More people voted last time than any time in American history in the middle of the worst pandemic in American history. More people did. And they showed up. They're going to show up again. They're going to do it again.
The future of voting rights remains uncertain as President Biden continues to stay out of a direct fight over the filibuster. The New York Times reporting that the White House is confident they can out-organize voter suppression. Meanwhile, Democratic state lawmakers from Texas have organized and have been in D.C. for nearly 2 weeks, thwarting their Republican colleagues' effort to pass a restrictive voting rights bill. Republican State Representative Steve Toth has been using that time to call for an audit of larger Texas counties that mostly went for Biden in 2020. Get this. He told the Washington Post, or the Washington Post is reporting, he said, quote, asked if he would consider including smaller counties, Toth replied, what's the point? I mean, all the small counties are red. Joining me now is Texas State Representative Jarvis Johnson and civil rights activist, MSNBC anchor, and author of Rise Up, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Thank you both very much for coming to the Sunday Show. Representative Jarvis, Representative Johnson, I did this the last time we talked, and I am so sorry. Representative Johnson, you've been here in Washington for nearly 2 weeks. How do you feel about the momentum behind the cause that brought you here in the first place?
I mean, we're very excited about it. The fact that we have calls from all over the country. People are encouraging us, and people are certainly singing kudos, but it has to continue. This is something that we have to maintain for the long haul. This is not just something that we're doing ceremoniously. We're actually working very diligently with the Senate and Congress to make sure that we pass the national bills like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, so that we can suppress all of the other hateful bills that the Republicans all across this country are trying to pass. So, but we have to maintain a Senate.
Let me get your reaction to what I read from your Texas State Representative colleague on the Republican side, Steve Toth, when he was asked if he would consider including smaller counties in this audit, and he says, what's the point? I mean, all the small counties are red. Representative Johnson, do you hear me?
That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
I think our connection is going bad, but I think that's the whole point of what the Republicans are trying to do. They're literally trying to find ways to say, oh, no, we don't need to look at ourselves. Let's go look at other places, because that's the whole point. We're already cheated. We already got our votes. We want to go look to see why everybody else didn't vote the way we wanted them to vote. And so that's the whole point of why they're looking into our, looking all over the place except where they need to look. And so that's what's creating this divide, this great divide in this country.
You know, Reverend Sharpton, you have been involved in the voting rights movement at the national level for a long time. You, like Representative Johnson, has been in meetings with the president and the vice president talking about this. From your perspective, is the momentum still there to get something done on voting rights on the national level?
I absolutely think the momentum is there and increasing. I think when you look at the fact that people are mobilizing in Georgia and Florida and in Texas, people are standing by the Democrats in the legislature from Texas that are in Washington now almost 2 weeks. Martin Luther King III and his wife and I intend to visit with the Texas Democrats this week. I talked to State Representative Reynolds. We want to go to the Hill and see some of the Republican senators, but we want to spend time there to show national support for them in their second week as Representative Jarvis is there. I think the momentum is building, and I think the president is right. People are going to come out and vote. The question is, we shouldn't have to come out and vote in huge numbers over restrictive laws. The right to vote should be protected. Whether or not we can out-organize people or not is beside the point. The real point is people's voting rights ought to be protected no matter what. And that is why I think you see these mobilizations. And I think it will culminate with a huge march August 28th right there in Washington, John.
All right. Reverend Sharpton, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm putting you on the spot. Knowing that you have been in meetings with White House officials, what have you told them about the filibuster? Have you told them in no cloudy language that he must do something, must articulate a forceful position about, at a minimum, reforming the filibuster so the For the People Act can get out of the Senate?
Well, I'll answer you right on the spot, and I've said this publicly. One, we said, and I said, as part of the meeting of the 8 civil rights leaders in the White House, that the filibuster needs to be totally revoked. The worst that we could see is that it be a carve-out to where on voting and constitutional issues there be a carve-out, as they do with certain other issues that have done it. Even Mitch McConnell has done it. I went to the president's speech in Philadelphia. I felt it was a monumental speech, a great speech. I talked with him after and said, again, great speech, but didn't mention the filibuster. I'm going to stay on you and the White House about the filibuster or the carve-out. He said, we've not worked on our position. We've not worked out our position on the carve-out. He said, but you know, I deal with the filibuster from a Senate rules way. And I've said to him candidly, and I continue to say it, and others of us are saying, we don't want to see the filibuster at all, but there must at least be a carve-out on the constitutional issue of voting. I think Congressman Clyburn has said it. Many of us in civil rights leadership have said it. We're going to keep on saying it and keep on pushing the White House toward that direction.
You know, Rev, we lost our connection to State Representative Jarvis Johnson, but one of the things I wanted to ask him about was something I talked to him about the special Lawrence and O'Donnell and I did back on Monday, where I asked him about the threats he's been receiving since leaving Texas for Washington. And he told me that one of the things that he has told his son to not drive in Texas because he's afraid of retaliation by state troopers. Oh, great. I understand that State Representative Jarvis Johnson is back. And I want to, is he there? Can we put him up on screen? Oh, okay, great. State Representative Jarvis Johnson, I was just saying to Reverend Al and also to the audience about something you and I talked about during the special, and that is, you know, the threats you have been receiving since leaving Texas and being in Washington. And one of the things you told me is that you have told your son to not drive in Texas because of your concern about retaliation on the part of Governor Abbott against you. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, the governor put out the call, and he said that he was going to round us up and corral us up and bring us back. And we've watched all across this country when there's a leader that does something like this, that there are people in their party that will take this and run with it. And what has happened, we saw how they ran President Biden's bus off the road here in Texas when we were in Texas. And so my son drives my car, which has state plates, and I just don't want some rogue cop or some fanatic of the Republican Party that listens to Governor Abbott as they say they need to bring us back because we're fugitives. And so I've had to say that to my son because we do understand. I understand what relationships are with police officers, black males, and I do know what's going on with most of the Republican Party when they want to take the law into their own hands and act as the hero to say, oh, we've rounded one up. And I don't want that mistaken identity, and I certainly don't want my son put in that situation. And so unfortunately, they don't understand what me as a black father have to go through. And as I talk to my son almost daily about make sure you get a ride for someone else. But for a whole week, he didn't even go to work and couldn't go out.
Wow. Texas State Representative Jarvis Johnson, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday Show. As always, Reverend Al Sharpton, thank you very much as well for coming to the show. Coming up next, a word or two from actors Mandy Patinkin and Catherine Grody on saving democracy in America. I'm telling you, you do not want to miss this.
It's easy. It's ringing. Huh? Hold on. Hello. Hello.
Get me a voter,
yes,
please.
I'm trying to get a voter
For
voting in a couple of weeks.
How you do it.
This is Mandy.
Yes.
How are you?
I know.
Yes,
You're voting.
I'm certain.
You're voting.
Oh, that sounds
bad. Sorry. Actors and activists Mandy Patinkin and Catherine Grody are an unstoppable duo who are using their platform to get out the vote, even in the face of voter suppression. Joining me now, actor, singer, and activist Mandy Patinkin, and his wife, actor, writer, and activist Catherine Grody. Mandy and Catherine, it's so great to see you. Welcome back to the Sunday Show.
Thank you for having us, Jonathan. That was an interesting reminder. Doesn't that seem like 10 years ago?
I know, and it wasn't that long ago. I would love, I'm sure you were listening during the conversation with Texas State Representative Jarvis Johnson and Reverend Al, would love to know, given all the work you're trying to do on voting rights, what you think about where things are at the national level on voting rights.
Well, it's staggering watching the representative talk about what they've had to do to protect our right to vote. You know, we're in an astonishing place. Every citizen in America of any party this should be a collective thing. No brainer. Let's protect our right to vote.
And you know, we're also trying to figure out what to do, what's the best thing to do. We work with swingleft.org. We work with the Movement Voter Project. And it's just really simple facts that you want to protect our democracy, and you want every single human being in this country, no matter what your political affiliation, is to have their sacred right of that vote and to protect it and to fight for it. And if you don't, our country is in terrible condition.
I mean, you have to know that we had more people vote than have ever voted before, right, in the last election.
Right.
And you don't need 400 bills across the country to protect the safest vote that's ever happened. Every court in the land, including the Supreme Court, said this was a fair vote. Let's have some critical thinking here and protect it for all of us. We all need to work together.
I don't want to forget something important. My son Gideon just texted me off a quick note, and he said, Dad, remember, tell people since 2021 alone, Republicans have introduced more than 400 bills to restrict voting rights in 49 states, according to the Brennan Center, with 30 actual laws already enacted across 18 states. This is insanity. This is our country, our sacred right, our Constitution. Every human being has a vote. Protect that vote, not just for Democrats, for Republicans, for independents, for every human being in America. For God's sake.
I mean, we all have to protect each other's rights to votes. And if they're suppressing it for people of color, they're going to suppress it for you next.
Oh, and I meant to say earlier, you know, sometimes I get confused. There's so many different between the For the People's Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Go to swingleft.org. Go to the Movement Voters Project.
Look at Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight. She'll explain it simply. Call your senators. Tell them you're on them. They represent you. The majority of people in this country want our vote protected, not denied.
And we also have the information on our social media. And go through it. Take time. It's complicated.
It's friggin' complicated.
But it is your future. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Hey, could I ask a question, teacher? All right.
You're actually going through the moderator.
I know, right? All right, so here's a serious question, because the passion that you both have is undeniable, and it is undeniable, you know, why you have it. So if you were to get a phone call from President Biden, what would you demand that he do on the matter of voting rights?
I'll leave it to my bride.
Oh, my God, it's terrifying. I would beg him to listen to Reverend Al about if we can't get rid of the filibuster, do the carve-out. I would say forget this whole notion, this bipartisan thing, you know. Get every Democrat you can. Get every decent Republican you can find. Get this law passed and protect us. I don't know what you have to do. I'm not president.
Right. We have an unusual opportunity here where we have the Congress and we have the White House because of the hard work that was done to get out the vote. We have a democratic system at this moment, and we need to use that opportunity to work out a carve-out that Stacey worked out with Manchin, as Catherine just said, and to look, you know, it'd be lovely if it could be bipartisan. We all wish everything could be. We must never stop working for that. At the same time, we have a moment of opportunity here. And when you restrict the vote, when you suppress the vote, that is exactly what happens in these other countries like Hungary and China and Russia and happened in Germany. And that is the road to the end of democracy and to the worst imaginary scenario. This is how it starts.
I would tell Biden, smell, I support him totally, but smell the present moment. It is not like it was in 1965 when we were able to pass that.
And we all worked so hard to make this moment be alive and embrace it and cherish it and use your God-given right to express your vote and your voice.
And facts and the truth, Jonathan. And if January 6th didn't scare the heck out of everybody, it should. Everybody should protect
Stacey Abrams has a great thing. We have it on our Instagram. We have it on our Twitter. And I'm sure it's everywhere.
Fair fight.
Where she tells you how to call. It's very funny to watch being interviewed by the senators. She takes you through the whole thing. Watch it, find it, and she'll just show you what to do. Because she says something very important, that even if you know your senator isn't going to be for it, you call him. He's your representative. He's working for you. And you put pressure on them. That is your right, and that is their job, to listen to you.
And talk about pressure, we gotta go. Mandy Patinkin and Catherine Grody, you know what? You are the best interview. You know why? All it takes is one question, and you guys are off to the races with so much energy and passion. Yeah, right. Right.
And thank you for what you're doing, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. This is not about me. This is about you, and this is also about this show, because we got to go. Catherine, Mandy, thank you very much. Coming up, my panel and I will sound off to the other Sunday shows. Stay with us.
The Republic will say what they will say. Our select committee will seek the truth. It's our patriotic duty to do so. And we do not come into our work worried about what the other side, who has been afraid of this. Maybe the Republicans can't handle the truth. But we have a responsibility to seek it, to find it, and in a way that retains the confidence of the American people.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi making it clear this morning, Democrats will not be deterred from getting to the truth of January 6th, even as her Republican counterpart is refusing to cooperate. Joining me now are Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large at The Bulwark and MSNBC contributor, Renee Graham, columnist and associate editor at the Boston Globe, and Joan Walsh, national affairs correspondent at The Nation. Thank you all very much for coming back to the Sunday show. I'm going to start at the end, that end of the screen there, and start with Joan Walsh. Is the speaker right? Are Republicans, they can't handle the truth?
Absolutely right. We talked about it at the time. She compromised so much to establish a bipartisan commission that would be outside of the legislature, that Republicans would have equal nominees, that they would have equal subpoena power. She gave them everything they wanted. And Kevin McCarthy cut the legs out from under his chief negotiator. Mitch McConnell blocked it. They would settle for nothing except stonewalling. So I'm incredibly proud that she's doing this. I wish that they would let the other three people who aren't maniacs serve, but if they won't, you know, she's going to do what she has to do. She can't be stonewalled. Democrats control all three branches of government. The idea that they can't do anything without Republican participation is just, it's a farce, and it's anti-small d democratic.
Renee?
You know, if you send in the clowns, you're going to get a circus. And Nancy Pelosi understands. what is on the table is much too important to allow, the GOP's hockey goon, Jim Jordan, and Jim Banks, who was questioning the legality of some of the votes of the election based on absolutely nothing, to have them on this commission. This is all about, exactly as Joan said, about stonewalling. The Republicans don't want any commission. So anything they do, they're going to try to turn into a mess. And Nancy Pelosi doesn't want that. This is too important. And the American people have a right to know exactly what happened on January 6th and what happened, why it happened, and who was behind it.
Charlie, since Renee invoked the name of Jim Banks, have a listen to what Jim Banks said earlier on Fox about why he got booted from the committee.
She claimed that the reason that she booted me from the committee was because of antics on the part of Jim Jordan and I. In hindsight, what I realize what she means by that now is that we were prepared to ask questions that no one else has asked and demand answers as to why the Capitol was vulnerable to an attack on January 6th. Why was there a systemic breakdown of security at the Capitol on January 6th? If you're going to investigate January 6th, why not ask those questions?
Charlie?
No, I mean, the reason he was booted from it was because of his antics, because he came out right out of the box and said that he was going to pursue a strategy of whataboutism and distraction. He's an election truther. He said that the only reason this committee was created was to malign conservatives. He was not going to be a good faith actor. I should perhaps note that his communications director is Tucker Carlson's son. But I think that Nancy Pelosi did draw a bright red line when she said, you know what, we are not going to allow members of the Sedition Caucus to disrupt this. This was an attack on democracy, and therefore it requires unprecedented moves. I should note that there will be Republicans on this committee. They may not be the Republicans that Kevin McCarthy wants, but it does look like Liz Cheney will be joined by Adam Kinzinger, the two Republicans that voted in favor of all of this. And I would say that I know that a lot of folks in the media will describe them as anti-Trump Republicans, but the reality is this is not about pro or anti-Trump. This is about whether or not you are pro-democracy, whether or not you actually want to get to the truth. And so I do think that Nancy Pelosi has drawn a bright red line that was completely justifiable by the attack on the Capitol. And I think that it will be a bipartisan committee going forward.
Right. And in fact, Speaker Pelosi did make that announcement today that Adam Kinzinger, Congressman Kinzinger, will be a part of the select committee. Let's switch gears and move away from January 6th and talk about something that they apparently seem to agree on in a bipartisan way. Infrastructure. Have a listen to Senator Portman on ABC this morning.
87% of the American people think we should do a bipartisan infrastructure package. It's the right thing to do. Every president in modern times has talked about it. President Trump's proposal was for $1.5 trillion in infrastructure. Ours is about $579 billion over 5 years. So this is the right thing to do. It's been totally bipartisan from the start. It's the way we ought to be doing things here in Washington to get stuff done. And I can't believe the Speaker of the House would be blocking it.
Do you have a deal?
We're about 90% of the way there.
Renee, you catch, well, first, leave aside the dig at Speaker Pelosi, how long it took him to say whether they have a deal?
Well, he doesn't want to be the guy who submarines this thing by saying, well, I don't really think we have a deal and it's not really going to happen. The remarkable thing is for 4 years, Infrastructure Week was kind of like, those who remember the TV show Dallas, it was like a Ewing barbecue. And whenever the Ewings would get together, something catastrophic would happen. So here we are again at an infrastructure week, hoping something actually gets done. But we're going to see how serious the Republicans are about this. Senator Portman is right. People want this bill. People want what this bill is promising. And if the Republicans are going to continue to obstruct and stonewall, I really hope that's what voters remember next year at the midterms.
Mm-hmm. Joan, are we gonna have a deal tomorrow, you think? One that can actually be debated and voted on?
I don't think we'll have one tomorrow. From what I've heard from, Senator Portman, Senator Toomey, the details aren't completely gelled yet, and they're still pretty far apart. I don't know how far on transit investment. And, they're arguing we've already put too much in transit. And if you take the subway in New York or you take the metro in D.C. or BART in San Francisco, my 3 cities, that that's not true. We're woefully behind in transit investment. And so that the deal could fall apart over that. I'm not ready to say, oh, yeah, it's going to happen.
Hey, Charlie, today in the New York Times, Michael Wolff has an op-ed. Michael Wolff is among the cavalcade of people who have books about the Trump presidency. His op-ed says flat out, he says Trump is definitely running for president in 2024. I am on the other side of that. I say, brother man ain't running. Where are you?
Well, I'm kind of where Phil Rucker is on all of this. He doesn't have to make a decision. Look, he's not going to say that he's not going to run because he would then become irrelevant and people wouldn't, come down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring. He wouldn't be able to raise money. It is a long time. But, the reality is that this nomination, the Republican nomination, is Trump's for the asking. No matter how deranged, no matter how deceptive he is, the Republicans will roll over. So that's going to be a great temptation. And he has all of these grievances that he needs to air. Many. So at this point, I think that the wind is at his back in terms of running. However, see, Jonathan, part of me agrees with you that that's a lot of work. That's hard work. And the one thing that Donald Trump cannot handle would be the prospect of losing again, being humiliated again. And this is part of his psychological makeup, why he is unable to come to grips with the fact that he was defeated in this election. He can't handle that. So could he handle another defeat? I'm just not sure.
Yeah, why is he going to run for a job he didn't want in the first place? Charlie Sykes, Renee Graham, and Joan Walsh, thank you all very much for coming back to the Sunday Show. Coming up, some tough love for the unvaccinated. Byline is next. Just when we thought it was safe to go back in the water that is normal life, the Delta variant has led to rising rates of infection, hospitalization, and death. And to make matters worse, too many folks don't want to protect themselves or the rest of us by getting vaccinated. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said this is becoming a, quote, pandemic of the unvaccinated for a reason. According to a new poll from the AP, 45% of the American adults surveyed who haven't been vaccinated say they, quote, definitely will not get the vaccine. An additional 35% of them say they, quote, probably will not. Come on, y'all. Early on, we were counseled to basically coddle those of you who didn't want to get the vaccine. The fear was that finger wags at those unwilling to get their upper arms jabbed would lead from vaccine hesitance to vaccine resistance. Look, I'm going to be truthful. The destructive path of the Delta variant and the danger it poses to our ability to maintain the gains we've made so far is wearing down my patience and that of notable others. Just listen to Kay Ivey, the Republican governor of Alabama.
I want folks to get vaccinated. That's the cure. That prevents everything. The data proves that it works. It doesn't cost you anything. It saves lives. Folks are supposed to have common sense. But it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down.
It's a little late to the party, but welcome. And I'm sure I'm going to catch all kinds of hell for saying this, but when doctors around the country are telling us that COVID infection rates are going up and that the overwhelming majority of those infections are among the unvaccinated, I'm more than happy to hurt some feelings. How can you read the Facebook posts of Alabama doctor Brittany Kobia about the last requests of young unvaccinated patients and not feel a roiling mix of sadness and rage? One of the last things they do before they're intubated is beg me for the vaccine, she wrote. I hold their hand and I tell them that I'm sorry, but it's too late. A few days later, when I call time of death, I hug their family members and I tell them the best way to honor their loved one is to go get vaccinated and encourage everyone they know to do the same. They cry and they tell me they didn't know. They thought it was a hoax. They thought it was political. They thought it was political and a hoax because folks who damn well knew better played politics with public health. Some say they are taking a wait-and-see approach. Half the nation is fully vaccinated with nary a report akin to the zombie plot of the movie 28 Days Later. So what y'all waiting and looking for? Some say they have questions about the science and worry about being experimented on. I totally get that. but I implore you to listen to the scientists who are pleading with you to trust them and the science. And let me address those self-proclaimed patriots who claim vaccine mandates, even mask mandates, infringe on their freedom. You're infringing on our freedom. Freedom to live our lives free from the fear that you are going to cost the rest of us our livelihoods, our well-being, and our peace of mind, all because you don't want to be told what to do. Well, you know what? Get over yourselves and get the vaccine before you ruin everything for all of us. I'm Jonathan Capehart, and this has been The Sunday Show. Just when we thought it was safe to go back in the water that is normal life, the Delta variant has led to rising rates of infection, hospitalization, and death. And to make matters worse, too many folks don't want to protect themselves or the rest of us by getting vaccinated. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said this is becoming a, quote, pandemic of the unvaccinated for a reason. According to a new poll from the AP, 45% of the American adults surveyed who haven't been vaccinated say they, quote, definitely will not get the vaccine. An additional 35% of them say they, quote, probably will not. Come on, y'all. Early on, we were counseled to basically coddle those of you who didn't want to get the vaccine. The fear was that finger wags at those unwilling to get their upper arms jabbed would lead from vaccine hesitance to vaccine resistance. Look, I'm going to be truthful. The destructive path of the Delta variant and the danger it poses to our ability to maintain the gains we've made so far is wearing down my patience and that of notable others. Just listen to Kay Ivey, the Republican governor of Alabama.
I want folks to get vaccinated. That's the cure. That prevents everything. The data proves that it works. It doesn't cost you anything. It saves lives. Folks are supposed to have common sense. But it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down.
She's a little late to the party, but welcome. And I'm sure I'm going to catch all kinds of hell for saying this, but when doctors around the country are telling us that COVID infection rates are going up and that the overwhelming majority of those infections are among the unvaccinated, I'm more than happy to hurt some feelings. How can you read the Facebook posts of Alabama doctor Brittany Kobia about the last requests of young unvaccinated patients and not feel a roiling mix of sadness and rage? One of the last things they do before they're intubated is beg me for the vaccine, she wrote. I hold their hand and I tell them that I'm sorry, but it's too late. A few days later, when I call time of death, I hug their family members and I tell them the best way to honor their loved one is to go get vaccinated and encourage everyone they know to do the same. They cry and they tell me they didn't know. They thought it was a hoax. They thought it was political. They thought it was political and a hoax because folks who damn well knew better played politics with public health. Some say they are taking a wait-and-see approach. Half the nation is fully vaccinated with nary a report akin to the zombie plot of the movie 28 Days Later. So what y'all waiting and looking for? Some say they have questions about the science and worry about being experimented on. I totally get that. But I implore you to listen to the scientists who are pleading with you to trust them and the science. And let me address those self-proclaimed patriots who claim vaccine mandates, even mask mandates, infringe on their freedom. You're infringing on our freedom. Freedom to live our lives free from the fear that you are going to cost the rest of us our livelihoods, our well-being, and our peace of mind, all because you don't want to be told what to do. Well, you know what? Get over yourselves and get the vaccine before you ruin everything for all of us. I'm Jonathan Capehart, and this has been The Sunday Show.